Sie sind mobilisiert durch Propaganda. Die beinhaltet, wir stehen höher als
They were mobilized by propaganda that states we are superior to the others. But for that, they need someone who is unequivocally beneath them. And the anti-Semitic insanity, the world conspiracy theories, led to an explosion of violent excess. And within the framework of this dynamic, symbols like this help.
Helfen solche Symbole.
Graphic artist Walter Heck from the Rhineland developed the double rune in 1929. Later, he wrote,
"The initial designs were unsuccessful because I didn't like the soft lines of the customary S, which also did not at all correspond to the character of the Schutzstaffel. I had the idea of representing the two S's in the form of two lightning bolts, and so unconsciously came upon the runes."
Runes were the written characters of the Germanic peoples. Starting around 200 AD, they were carved into wood or stone. They were used to inscribe objects such as coins, gifts, burial objects, and memorials. Today, only a few experts are truly familiar with the runic characters of the Germanic tribes. Professor Klaus Duvel from Göttingen provides an example of how the comparatively primitive writing can be interpreted.
This stone says, King Sven had this stone set for Skarthi, his liegeman. It reads up here, then down, up again, then down again. And he travelled far to the west and died here near Haithabu.
Sven kunuker satti stein uftir skartha varth tauther at Haithabu.
But researchers are still unsure about the origin of runes. Of the 6,500 runic inscriptions that have been found so far, several are based on an alphabet with 24 letters. They are related to other European writing. Back in 1935, Himmler had created an ancestral heritage research team to which he appointed dubious experts, more motivated by ideology than serious scholarship. Many of them were esotericists and occultists. They dug, grave-robbed, and reinterpreted. To them, simple ornamentation was enough to prove an ideology. And if they couldn't find the proof they wanted, sometimes they helped it along.
The Nazis didn't care so much about demonstrating a development. Rather, they wanted to prove, above all, that history was based on the permanence of races. Investigating the past was meant to prove that there is a superior race in human history.
The SS was meant to wage war not only for the state, but for the Aryan race. That included especially fanatical frontline combat units, as well as task forces for killing Jews, and the units assigned to the death camps. What they all had in common was the SS runes. They were a form of identification.
The fact that the symbol of the SS, the double Sieg rune, was made a character on typewriters is unprecedented.
The new key was also meant to help make typing more efficient. Since the occupation of areas in the east, the bureaucracy had swelled. The runes of the SS became seen more commonly in Germany.
It represented power and advantages. There was also an opposite label, and that was the yellow Jewish badge. Those who had to wear that were nothing. They had no power. They were vermin to be eliminated.
One of the SS officers would say that Himmler spoke of the decimation of the Slavic race by 30 million. For his speech, Himmler used a hall called the Obergruppenführersaal. Here, around the so-called Black Sun, the race fanatics forged their plans for the Third Reich, as Himmler imagined it. This hall, designed by the SS during the remodeling of the Wewelsburg, today has special significance for neo-Nazis. In its black sun, they see 12 Sieg runes, or 3 swastikas laid on top of each other. Himmler's SS provided thousands of perpetrators of the Holocaust. Many of them were motivated to kill by a deep, racist delusion. Hitler was aware of how valuable his loyal Heinrich, as he called him, was. But he was suspicious of his fondness for the supernatural.
There are very clear statements from Hitler made in trusted company where he considered this, as he called it, occult nonsense, as advocated by Himmler, to be out of the question, and thought it was a very unfortunate development. In his culture speech at the party rally, he said decidedly that the Nazi Party was not a cult movement, but a political movement.
What do the signs of evil really stand for? Back in May 1933, the Nazi regime passed a law protecting national symbols. Nazism was supposed to exude a similarly potent allure. Nazi symbols decorated city centers on holidays. The party marketed itself with flags and bunting.
The color code the Nazis used fit very well into their whole ideology. You have the brown, which stands for the militaristic aspect, for the SA and the SS. Then you have black, of course, which was later used for the SS and which exuded an incredible aggressiveness and brutality, especially in connection with the image of the skull. And you have the signal color of red, used along with the swastika, which has a great pithiness and recognizability.
No one else in politics had used these mass media in such an intense way. So the effect on the population was, of course, especially intense.
Traditionally, in those folkish circles, there was the notion that the German or Aryan person also had to distinguish himself through a special font, so there was a real cult surrounding these Fraktur typefaces, German typefaces.
Official documents were printed in Fraktur, and film posters used the old-fashioned fonts. In 1937, Jewish-owned publishers were forbidden from using Gothic typefaces. But from 1941, Hitler, along with Martin Bormann, suddenly espoused Roman type. It was an about-face, away from the allegedly Old Germanic. Bormann issued a circular in which he polemically stated that for him, Fraktur was only made up of Schwabacher Jewish letters, presumably a reference to the fact that Jewish publishers had earlier dealt in books printed with the Schwabach Fraktur typeface. After the surrender, hundreds of thousands of people were arrested by the Allies. And suddenly the SS runes were revealing, the symbol of evil identified perpetrators. Sometimes, a tattoo indicating a blood group was the key evidence. Often, simply belonging to Himmler's SS was enough for the victors as proof of guilt. Some prisoners were executed immediately. Others were put on trial. In October of 1945, the Allies passed a law forbidding the Nazi Party and all its organizations, including the SS. The newly founded Federal Republic of Germany went one step further, penalizing the use of Nazi symbols. But the fatal attraction has not gone away. The old symbols appear again and again, whether out of ignorance, an assertion of convictions, or as a provocation. Right-wing extremists like to cause provocation using slightly altered symbols. They know exactly what is allowed and what is not. Extremism and racism signaled through slight variations of the old symbols. The inhuman messages of Heinrich Himmler and his henchmen are still behind these tattoos and posters. And the black sun continues to be used.
In this country, you were allowed to have and to express extremist views. As painful as that might be, it's a part of our liberty. The line is drawn either where other persons are disparaged or where specifically outlawed organizations are promoted or advertised. And that does not apply to the Black Sun.
Combating the signs of evil is about more than just a right-wing clothing label or historical details. It's about liberty and the future.